Broken vows. Dew covers the window, briefly impeding my view of you, my dear husband. I should be thankful, since watching you flex your muscles for the giggling blonde sickens me. My jaw aches as Blondie touches your arm and your lips curl in a smile. That's what I call her, Blondie. Others would perhaps go with something more vulgar. But you know me better than that, don't you? Just like I know you better than Blondie knows you. She hasn't spent 19 years with you as Mrs. Nathaniel Wilson. Is your ring such a burden that you had to remove it? Mine is ever with me around my neck, since it no longer fits, yet I don't want a new one. This one is still perfect, even if our marriage isn't. I keep my wedding ring closer to me than our wedding photo. Our wedding photo stays in my purse, with me always. Oh, I know it's old-fashioned. You always thought I was old-fashioned, though. Isn't that one of the things you like about me? You leave your laundry lying around for me to clean and fold. You leave the toilet seat up for me to constantly put down. Little things that most women don't like to do for their men, but I've never minded taking care of you. Even making you fun meals gives me pleasure. You're the love of my life. Of course, I'll always take care of you. I always carry you with me, my love, even if you no longer carry me with you. My hands tighten around the steering wheel while you hold her in your arms and kiss her. Sharp anger courses through my veins. You've never kissed me with such passion. Trembling, I shift to the right, my side pressing into my metal coffee mug. Ow! It's enough to remind me to be more discreet. I slide lower. As I think about what punishment will suit you best, I almost miss you getting into your truck. I'll never understand what drew you to the dark blue diesel truck, but I never could refuse you anything, even while I still drive this rust bucket. Oh, you'll deny the affair. You've denied things before. Remember the time we went grocery shopping, and you insisted I liked oatmeal, refusing to get cereal? Our argument was so heated. Security came and kicked us out of the store. You have such a horrible memory, don't know? Otherwise, why would you be out with other women instead of at home, in bed with me? As you drive away, I rub my wedding ring, wondering what I should do next. Should I confront her now or later? But Blondie is already inside, making my decision easier and giving me more time to contemplate what form of discipline will work best with you and best for our marriage. As I drive past her house, my cell rings. I'm late for work again. If I'm fired and you become our sole supporter, you'll only have yourself to blame. I do the best I can with my graying hair and smooth out the wrinkles in my scrubs. Somehow, I make it through the workday, even after several reprimands. All I can do is think about you with Blondie. Will you be with her again tonight? I beat the steering wheel until my hand hurts. It's not fair. I've been the dutiful wife all these years, and you're destroying our marriage without giving me a chance to fix it. It took all day to think of the perfect punishment, but now I know what must be done. There is retribution to be had, and I will dole out justice quickly and fairly. Speeding through 2 red lights, I vow everything will come out today. Finding you, my darling, is always easy with the Cell Tracker app. I roll my eyes. Of course you'd choose this dump for your liaison. Decent people no longer come here. As if proving my point, hoodlums lean against the poorly graffitied wall, taking up the entire sidewalk. I wait for you inside the safety of my locked car. I don't know how much longer you'll be inside, so I quickly dig through my purse. This time I'm prepared. Your cheating will end today, sweetie, that I promise you. The hoodlums laugh, up to no good already. They're victims, an elderly couple trying to get into the movie theater. One masked man shoves the old man. I hesitate to get out. I've never liked bullies, you know that, but I don't know how to help him. Thankfully, You make the decision for me. My heart melts as I fall in love with all over again. You're a hero, scaring away the hoodlums and help the elderly man up. Trembling, I wonder if there's a chance for us after all. You're alone and acting like your old self. Hope blossoms in my chest. We're going to be okay. I know we will be. You'll remember how much you love me. We'll get counseling. We can move. I'll switch jobs. It's not a big deal. Our future shines brightly in front of me, a beacon of hope. Until I'm to go, I am here. My guts twist. Blondie skips outside and takes your hand. Grabbing what I need from my purse, I take a deep breath. I take my vows seriously. Obviously you don't. After tonight, you will. That's another vow I intend to keep, you'll see. Until death do us part. I shove the car door open. As you walk, hand in hand, with her, I gulp down the rising bile. You asked for this. Hey. One of the masked hoodlums comes back. This time, he's brandishing a weapon. No. My life. My heart. My world. I run. Nathaniel. I'd do anything for you. Even now, my love. Pop. 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 Your stunned face fills my vision. Something bursts through my chest and trickles down my stomach. My love. My heart. My world. You do care. You do love me. Your lips move, but I can't hear you. Then all at once everything comes into focus. Pained, hot. The taste of blood. The smell of asphalt. Is she going to be all right? Who is she? I don't know, honey. Anger, a more familiar, more welcoming feeling than pain, courses through me. I've taken a bullet for you, and you're still lying. Husband married. I can say no more, but the physical pain is nothing compared to the agony of my breaking heart. You're married? Of course not. Call 911. Someone stop him. What's this? Blondie kneels next to me, picking up the proof of your infidelity. Although I'm drifting, I smile. I told you, everything will come out today. Floating in the sky, I see us. You, me. You are my world, my heart, my everything. My body lies at your feet as you stare at our wedding photo. You see? I keep my vows. I love you. I whisper from above. Always. Hash. Nathaniel Wilson shudders as he stares at the photo. The paramedics work on the woman's body, but he no longer sees them. The vein in his temple pulses erratically as he finally remembers. Instead of paramedics and police, he is surrounded by friends he hadn't thought of in years. He was 8, fingernails covered in dirt. His friend Tommy said, "You love her for always? Gross girly cooties and all?" The girl beside him chewed on her lip. "Sure," he shrugged. He gave her a plastic ring I'd gotten from a quarter machine, glad to be rid of it. He'd wanted the glow-in-the-dark slime, but the ring had popped out instead. Tommy snapped a picture of them. With a snap, the girl's name comes easily. Darla Hammonds. The photo floats to the ground, landing beside a ring on a broken chain. Pink and silver plastic he'd given a girl when he was just a boy. He picks it up, surprised his hands aren't shaking. "You sure you don't know this woman?" An officer asks. His mind races. How is this possible? I haven't seen her in almost 20 years. How do you explain this? The officer holds up 2 IDs, Nathaniel Wilson and Darla Wilson. Wilson. Is this your address? I live alone. The vein pulses harder. He stares past the IDs to the rusted car. He's seen that car before. He's sure of it. He glances at Darla's body. There had been an incident at a grocery store last year. A woman yelled at him about cereal. She wanted Fruit Loops. Although he tried getting away from her, she kept screaming at him. Security was called and she left. All the confusing moments in his apartment flood him. Missing groceries, food portioned out that he never remembered making, washed and folded laundry he knew he didn't do, his Wi-Fi usage going up, the toilet lid always down. He grasps his girlfriend's hand, grounding himself, as the realization dawns on him. A doctor had diagnosed him with parasomnia. He'd always thought he was going crazy, but he hadn't lived alone after all. 1 Corinthians 15:42-44. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. And it is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. Caskets, they come in different colors, shapes, and sizes. There isn't one that's a cut above the other. They all serve the same purpose, to house our loved ones in the ground, never to be unearthed again. Caskets have no respect of person. Doesn't matter your social status, how beautiful you are, what you've accomplished in life, your age. The furrows on Rachel's forehead intensified as the baby blue box descended beneath the earth. Her vision blurred, and her glass-shattered lips trembled as the box slowly vanished. "Richard!" She took her husband's coat collar in her fists and pulled him close. "James, he's afraid of worms. We have to make sure there aren't any down there." Richard looked around at the melancholic faces and back at his wife. He pried her fingers from his coat. "That's enough, Rachel," he whispered. Rachel cradled herself in the folding chair. Her mother rubbed her back in small circles until she leapt from her seat and into the hole. The men pulled Rachel away as she tried opening the casket. "My baby," she said. The men handed her off to Richard. He lifted her off the ground, thanked his guests for attending, and dragged the flailing woman to the car. He opened the passenger door and forced her in. "No, my baby, my S." Rachel's ears chimed like a Tibetan bowl, the one she used to put baby James to sleep. Her crazed gaze slowly turned to Richard's fiery eyes as she held her cheek. "He's gone, Rachel." Richard's lip trembled as his eyes filled with strands of red. "James is dead. You gotta move on." When the passenger door slammed, Rachel jumped out of her sleep. She skulked out of bed as to not alert her sleeping giant. Rachel couldn't put on her house shoes. She never learned to pick up her feet. The sliding against the wood floor would alert Richard. He'd keep her from going there. Rachel tiptoed out of the bedroom to the room across the hall. Her eyes dried and her nostrils stung as she reached for the knob. When she opened the door, it was just as he left it, before he was diagnosed. She stepped over the scattered toys and treaded over the Legos as if she were firewalking. Rachel cradled the sheets in the race car bed. "Kai deep with 'em." She stopped when the room lit. Rachel turned to the door to see Richard, nostrils flared. "Tomorrow!" He threw his hands in the air and shut the door behind him. Rachel's legs bounced under her desk tirelessly. Her knee sent shockwaves through the cubicle, causing her neighbor to peer his head around the corner. "Sorry, Arthur," Rachel mouthed. The hour hand of the clock tormented her amber eyes as it crept to its goal. Rachel gathered her belongings. Her consultant of the month plaque, card saying, "Sorry for your loss," and a coffee cup stained with lip gloss. When the hour hand struck 5, Rachel grabbed her belongings and punched out. The elevator was taking too long. She had to get there before Richard got home. Rachel opted for the stair, skipping steps, jumping from flight to flight, shattering her heels on the first floor. Rachel swore as she removed her shoes and walked barefoot through the lobby. Richard's car wasn't in the driveway when she got home. With Olympic timing, Rachel was standing before James' door. Bye. When she opened the door, she was met with bare walls, tape, holes, and silhouettes of posters. The once colorful floors was now an ashy pine. It's as if all of James' belongings hopped in his race car bed and drove off. Rachel gripped her shirt collar and hyperventilated. She rushed to the closet, empty. Not even a lone coat hanger. When she heard the front door open, she rushed with a hammer in hand. Whoa! Richard raised his hands filled with grocery bags. Rachel dropped the hammer and wrapped her arms around his stocky body. "Richard," she said with her face in his shirt, "we've been robbed. They took all of James' things." Richard sighed, dropped his shoulders and turned his eyes to the heavens. "No one robbed us," he said in a soft tone. Rachel released him, leaving his shirt stained with salty tears and mascara. She followed him into the kitchen. His eyes danced around the cupboards, occasionally landing on a distraught face. Rachel moved at a snail's pace as she sat at the kitchen island. "Richard," she whispered. "Where are our boys' things?" she asked. Richard sighed. He put the food away as Rachel's pupils followed him like heat-seeking missiles. "Rich. Gone. Gone? Okay. Where? You tell me where?" Rachel said. Richard slammed his hand on the kitchen island. "No, Rachel. Enough is enough. I'm not saying turn the boy's pictures down, not celebrate his birthday, not talk about him. Hell, I wish we would, but you." Rachel rested her head on the island and sobbed. Richard slowly walked around and pulled up a stool next to her. Hesitantly, he reached for her bony back. "I miss him too. Picking him up from school, taking him to baseball games he'd never remember, having him run into my arms after a hard day. Even miss that stupid Baby Shark song." Richard chuckled. Rachel joined him as she wiped her eyes. "Just not healthy, Rachel." Richard said, "Wow." Rachel nodded and smiled. I need it too." "No, it's in your purse." Rachel shoved him away and marched into the bedroom. That night, she slept with her purse in the fetal position, going as far as taking it with her in the shower the next morning. The workday was coming to an end. Rachel glanced at the clock before returning to the numbers on the computer screen. "No earthquakes today," a muffled voice asked beyond the cubicle wall. Rachel scoffed. By 5:15, she packed her belongings, waited for the elevator, and walked out the front door. Rachel's attention was on her phone as she cruised down the road. She searched for and called every storage in the proximity. She suddenly gasped, dropped her phone, and pulled the emergency brake. The car came to a stop, but not without tapping a crossing pedestrian. "Oh my God!" She struggled to undo her seatbelt before jumping out the car. An old man chuckled as he slowly stood to his feet. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention, he raised his hand. "Fret not, pygmy. You just give me a little shove is all," he said. "Are you sure you don't need an ambulance? You think they can cure embarrassment?" He laughed until he coughed. When Rachel rested her hand on his back, his eyes dilated and his smile faded. "Can you help me to my home?" he asked. "Just across the street. Bring you things, lot of thieves round here." Rachel agreed. She grabbed her purse and ushered the old man to his home. A 2-story house with shrubbery overtaking the windows, weeping paint, and gutters filled with decaying leaves roasting away in the May heat. The elderly man introduced himself as BJ, welcoming Rachel into his home. He claimed fate brought the two of them together. He was a special kind of doctor in Jamaica and could sense something was wrong with her. The two had a seat at his table. Rachel looked around. Masks on the walls, dried animal carcasses, and old papers scattered on the desk. "I don't think you can help with this," she said. "Try me," BJ said. Rachel fiddled with her fingers, chipping the purple paint from her nails. "It's my son." Rachel got a sudden sensation of heartburn. "I know he's gone, but..." "Says who? I can sense the boy in your purse." Rachel gasped. She rummaged through the purse and pulled out a plastic bag containing a clump of hair. "Knew it," BJ said. "So we can talk to him?" Rachel asked. BJ reached his decrepit hand over the table, covering hers. "We can bring him back," he whispered. He gestured for the hair. He got up to retrieve a brown and stained rag doll. BJ chanted, dipped his fingers in oil, anointed his forehead, Rachel's eyes, telling her to keep them shut, and dunked the hair in the oil before sewing it to the doll. "Oh, Pen," BJ said. He coughed. Face was drained, and sweat raced down his temple. Rachel's eyes parted. He was there. "Little James." "Mama?" he asked. "Jage?" Rachel covered her mouth as tears seeped between her fingers. He raised his arms as she reached for him. She sat him in her lap and kissed him relentlessly. "Thank you, BJ," Rachel said. With a smirk across his face, BJ laid motionless on the table, arm extended as if he were reaching for something. Rachel put a $20 bill in his hand. "Bless you," she said before making her exit. She raced across the street, not paying attention to the oncoming traffic as she cradled and talked to James. "What are you nuts?" one stranger asked. "Pay attention," said another. Rachel still had James' car seat in her car. She strapped him in, and the two of them listened to Baby Shark the whole ride home. Richard's nose was engulfed in nostalgia as he entered the home. The simmering pots and pans taunted him as the aroma paraded throughout the house. Rachel cooked, he thought to himself. It's been nearly 2 years. Richard called out to Rachel. He went from room to room in search of her. He noticed the light beneath James's door. "Babe, it's been years since..." All of the items he placed in a storage unit, all the way in New Jersey, made their way back to the room. Rachel had her back turned as she sat on the edge of the race car bed. Richard sighed. "Rachel, what were you?" Rachel shushed him. When Richard walked over to investigate, his eyes bulged from his skull. "Rachel, what is that thing tucked under James's sheets?" James started to cry. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Way to go, Richard. You made your son cry when I finally got him to sleep." "My okay, Rachel? Give me that thing." When Richard grabbed James, a searing pain cut his hand. "Mommy, Dad wants to hurt me," James said. "He won't. Just forgot your face is all," Rachel said. Richard was dumbfounded. "What?" he asked. "Are you talking to that thing?" Rachel pushed him aside with James in arms, telling him to wash up for dinner. The silverware did all the talking at dinner, as the spoons clashed with the china. Richard sighed and poked at his food. His eyes peered up at James across the table. "Why aren't you eating, little James?" Rachel asked. Richard dropped his silverware. He laughed with his face in hands. "He's a bunch of straw and rags," Richard said. "I can't." Richard got up from the table and put his dish in the sink. The slamming door caused James to jump. Rachel told him to eat. When James said he didn't feel well, Rachel dropped everything. Not again! She rushed to put on shoes and grabbed her keys. I know what will make me feel better, James said. What? Anything. Rachel crouched before him. Mommy's blood. Rachel frowned. Baby, our blood types don't M. I want to drink it. I need to, James said. The two of them turned to the steak knife that rested on the table. Rachel slowly reached for it, pricked her finger, and held it to James' face. He sucked vigorously until he was satiated. Be better? Rachel asked. He gave her a stained grin. Good, she said. Rachel stumbled to her feet. Blood was the only thing he'd accept, but no one other than Rachel would give it to him. After countless attempts of trying to enroll him school, Rachel had run out of sick and vacation days. So, she took James to her mother. When her mother, Annette, answered the door, she gasped. Grey-blue lips, bags under her eyes that resembled fortune cookies, and her once tan skin was bleached. Rachel, what happened? Let me. Rachel extended her hand. I need you to watch James, she said. She extended him. Before a word could escape Annette's mouth. Nah, one will do it, Mommy. The schools, daycare. Kids won't even play with him at the park. Annette nodded and grabbed James by the arm between her index finger and thumb. She raced to the phone as Rachel pulled off. Rachel stumbled out the elevator at work. When she took her seat at her computer, her cubicle neighbor, Arthur, heard a thud. That's my neighbor, he said as he peered over the wall. How was somebody call 911? Rachel awoke to the sound of a heart monitor. She looked around the hospital bed until she noticed Richard sitting at the end of the bed. Richard! Where's... Richard had James in hand. He stared at him blankly. I've been trying to understand. Been staring at this thing for hours, but... Rachel, I can't do this anymore. I can't watch you. She stared into his brown eyes. He sat James at the end of the bed. You know they thought I did this to you? Richard asked. Rachel looked at the lacerations on her arms. I had to feed. Richard raised his finger. They say you need me now more than ever. He pointed at James. Apparently not. Not watching you self-destruct. Love you too much. I'll be by with the divorce papers next week. Richard shut the door behind him. James sobbed. He didn't feed me, Mommy, he said. Rachel frantically crawled to the end of the bed, snatched her IV, and held James face to the blood. A week had passed, and Richard returned to the house with an envelope in hand. The house was black. Richard flipped the switch, only clicks. He removed his coat and called out to Rachel. He rolled his eyes before venturing, but knew where she would be. He shook his head before entering James' room. The full moon illuminated through the window, as James sat propped up on the bed. This stupid piece of S. The door slammed behind him. Richard turned to investigate only for a cold piece of steel to pierce his Adam's apple. Rachel pulled the dagger from his neck as he gargled in the floor. Why? He mouthed. You were going to hurt him, Rachel said. She ran to James. It's okay, baby. Sit me in the blood, James said with a stern face. With wide eyes, Rachel gave a yellow grin. Have Mommy's blood instead. Put me in the blood, woman. Shocked, Rachel rested James next to his inanimate father. He soaked up the crimson mixture like a sponge. Rachel's temperature started to rise and her head pounded. When she looked up, James was gone. A green gas emitted from a rag doll in the floor, and rushed into Richard's nostrils. "James, James?" Rachel said as she turned frantically. The baseboards creaked behind her. Richard had risen to his feet and cracked his neck. "Ah," he exhaled. Rachel backed away until her back met the door. Richard, where's James? What'd you do to my son?" Rachel asked. Richard smiled. "Me not Richard, and your child was just an illusion." Rachel shook her head. "It's me, don't you remember?" Richard hunched his back and fell over as if he were hit by a car. "BJ? In the flesh. Not mine, but it's been like that for centuries. Pretending to be your son allowed me to walk amongst the living once more." "Chow." BJ pushed Rachel to the side. Eyes widened, Rachel hit him in the back. "Give me back my s—" When she looked down, BJ pulled the dagger from her stomach. She fell next to the rag doll. BJ towered over her and reached for her face. He kissed his teeth. Consider it a parting gift. When he rubbed her eyelids, Rachel turned to see James on the floor. "Oh, my baby," she said. Rachel crawled to him and held him tight. After reports of a smell coming from a family home, officers were sent to do a welfare check. There they found the body of a 32-year-old woman cradling a rag doll. The city issued out a manhunt for the husband. However, after further investigation, the officers found no foul play, had witnesses testify about the woman's strange behavior, and ruled it a suicide. Mitchell Conroy's Oxfords clacked and heart thumped as he hurried through the settling dusk from something. Since breakfast, the eerie sensation of being watched had intensified with the crawling of his skin. He hadn't seen anyone or heard anything, but he felt it wherever he went. Something was coming, and the darkness was making it bolder. He picked up the pace as he turned into the tree-lined avenue that led to the wrought iron gates of his community. Sticky puddles of sweat beneath his suit urged him on until he reached the keypad, disengaged the lock, and pushed through the gate, letting it slam shut behind him. Not safe. Not yet. That inexplicable belief that he was about to be pounced on carried him across the courtyard, up marble steps, along a plant-filled balcony to his apartment. Lights on. Door locked. Silence. Apart from his panting and the banging of the courtyard gate. Or did he imagine that? Rubbing a hand over his mouth, he tried to calm his heart. It didn't work. The unexpected paranoia that had invaded his world when he left the complex that morning remained. But why? He didn't have enemies. He was a real estate agent. Single, tax-paying, boring. There was no reason anybody should want to stalk him. Yet even now, in the security of his home, his skin continued to prickle and burn. "What the hell?" he said, slapping his face as he hurried into the hall. "I was starting to feel good about things. Why have I suddenly got anxiety?" He stopped between the doors that led to his bedroom and bathroom, alongside the mirror on the wall. The oval mirror with the antique frame, intricately carved with twisted vines and writhing dragons. The mirror with the murky, clouded glass. The mirror that had eased his pain and guilt. He needed a fix. He pressed his hands to the wall either side of the antique and lifted his head, then started in surprise at what he found. What? A bump from somewhere in the apartment distracted him, and he spun to face back the way he'd come. The door was open, but he'd locked it. Hadn't he? He straightened, stepped away from the wall. "Is someone there?" he called. Silence. For a moment then. Yes, a familiar voice caressed him from behind, and a suited arm snaked around his neck. "Thank you for showing me your life. This is my home now." The last thing Mitchell saw before his neck snapped was his reflection in the mirror where it belonged. Its eyes were charcoal. 5. "Hi, I'm Julia." The speaker, an upbeat woman with long graying hair, scurried towards him through a cluttered aisle of antiques, a large mirror cradled in her arms. "Looking for anything particular?" "Sorry," the man in the suit with the neatly trimmed goatee replied, stepping back from a grandfather clock. "Just browsing." "Beautiful, isn't he?" The woman nodded at the face of the soldier and his diligent marching hands. "They don't make them like this anymore." "They don't," the man replied, summoning a melancholy smile. "My parents had one like it. It was lost in a fire and, well, whenever I pass an antique store now I just have to look. But this isn't the one." Turning from the clock, ready to leave, he met the woman's gaze and was staggered. Obsidian gray eyes regarded him from a sallow complexion, with an intensity that made him feel weak. "A fire!" She cocked her head. "How tragic! If only we could also replace parents." "What? Could I interest you in a mirror?" she went on, unperturbed. "I wrangled this job by impressing the owner with my knowledge, but I still need to make a sale. This mirror needs a new home, and I know you'll make a good owner. It's Japanese, pre-Edo. Isn't it beautiful?" As she spoke, she held up the mirror, so he couldn't help but peer into its depths. "Why did you say that?" he asked, as his gaze was sucked into the murky glass. "About parents? Call it intuition," the woman replied. "I know when people are hurting, when they shoulder blame. Your parents' house wasn't safe. The wiring needed maintenance. You could have done it." "Hey," he said, moving to push the mirror aside but stopping short. His reflection had juddered, or so he thought, and now it looked liquid and soft. "Hating yourself is normal, but you don't have to suffer. The glass in this mirror has special properties. Looking into it for a short time each day can heal the soul. What do you think? Looking into it now, do you feel better?" "I feel woozy. How did you know?" He cut himself off when something in the mirror caught his eye. A door ajar at the bottom of the aisle. A pile of crumpled clothes on the floor. A puddle of what looked like spilled paint. "I'll do you a deal," the woman called Julia said, stepping closer and removing the image. "Whatever you can afford. Your parents would want you to have it. It will help with the guilt. Just look. That's all you have to do. Look and let it breathe for you. What do you say?" Mitchell Conroy found himself removing his wallet as he stared into familiar eyes that somehow put him at ease. "Well, it is nice. I like the frame. The engravings, I guess I can help. We have a deal. For what the hell happened in there, Detective?" Officer Rice, mopping sweat from his forehead, rested his bulk against the open-doored sedan and basked in the glow of its spinning light. "Get anything out of the boy?" "Not much," Detective McCoy replied from the driver's seat, tugging at the hairs in his mustache. "He's deeply traumatized, sending him in to be assessed." As he spoke, he watched a patrol car pull away, his eyes on the passenger in the back, the 12-year-old had put there a minute before. "You reckon he did it?" Rice continued. "That level of brutality towards his own mother seems impossible." McCoy pushed himself out of the vehicle while Rice refolded his hanky. Nearby, crime scene investigators were wheeling a covered gurney from an apartment block. No signs of a break-in, no evidence of anyone else in the apartment. Kid discovered covered in blood and cowering in the bathroom by the neighbors who found the door open. But why was it open? Rice shrugged. Boy tried to run but changed his mind? Or he went out and came back? What did the neighbors say? Rice tugged a flip pad from the pocket of his sweat-stained shirt. Julia Harrison moved here 6 months ago with her son after her husband left her for another woman. Seems the boy blamed her for the breakup for not being able to see his dad. She worked long hours. He skipped school. Arguments and raised voices were a regular occurrence. But things seemed to be looking up for her. Neighbors thought she might be seeing someone. Could have been a trigger for the kid, but then... McCoy stared into the gray, mid-morning sky, brow creased as he recalled what the boy had babbled, over and over. Any sign of a broken mirror? The pudgy officer frowned. No, he was going on about that when we took him out. Something about his mother breaking a mirror. There's a screw where one could have hung, but what did he say? McCoy pinched his forehead at the onset of a migraine. Crazy stuff, said his mother did it to herself, with glass from a broken mirror. He said it was cursed, said whenever he looked in it, the person looking back wasn't him. Well, there you have it, Rice said, tucking the pad away. Complete mental break, just when you think you've seen it all. McCoy hemmed as he watched the remains of Julia Harrison be loaded into the back of an ambulance. He wasn't so sure. He'd looked into the kid's eyes, recognized his fear. He was telling his truth. Regardless of what had happened in that apartment, there had been a mirror where one was not now. And this case would not be solved till it was found. 3. Hayden, I got a call from the school. They want me to go in. Again. Stepping around discarded clothes and empty soda cans, Julia opened the curtains in the dimly lit bedroom before turning to her son, who was lying in bed on his phone. Hayden, are you listening? No, he snapped, jumping up and storming out of the room. Why should I? You don't listen to me. You have to go to school, Hayden. It's the law, and it would do you good to make friends. I told you I'll go to school in Riverton, not here. I hate the mouth-breathing morons in this shithole. All I get is weird looks and whispers. Sending you back to Riverton is not an option. I know you think I'm doing it to punish your father, but that's not it. Your dad is... I don't like saying it, but he can't look after you. He's like a child himself. Don't, the greasy-haired preteen interrupted, stopping dead in the hall. Talk about him like that. I don't mean anything bad, Julia said, coming to stand behind him, wispy strands of gray hair brushing her cheeks. I don't hate him anymore. If I thought he'd be good for you, I'd let you go, but that's not the case. One day you'll understand. God, Hayden, things got so much easier for me when I surrendered my anger. They can for you too. Have you tried looking in the mirror? Jesus Christ. Hayden cast the antique on the wall, a look of disgust. See, you don't listen. I told you I'm not going near that thing. There's something wrong with it. No, there's not. It's just old. But it does have soothing properties. I know it sounds crazy, but look what it's done for me. I haven't felt this relaxed in years. You have to give it a chance. If it's so good, why did Peterson give it away? Hayden challenged, stomping past the mirror towards the bathroom. Then go and strangle his wife. Why would you still want it after that? We don't know he did that. He was found dead too. Somebody else could have... That's irrelevant. The mirror was a gift. Just look. Hayden at the bathroom groaned when he saw his mother had taken the mirror from the wall and was coming towards him. No! As much as he tried not to look, he couldn't avoid making eye contact with a version of himself that made his skin crawl. Get away! He jabbed his arms out and shoved, causing Julia to stagger into the wall. She yelped, lost her grip, let it drop. Hayden, halfway through the bathroom door, stopped when he heard the smash. No! Julia cried, dropping to her knees in a puddle of glass. What have you? Tears in her eyes. She looked at her son and saw he was staring at the floor, the frame, the shattered glass. His eyes were wide, his mouth agape. His face had lost all color. Mom, he stuttered. And that's when she put her hand on a fragment of glass and felt it stab her. 200 in her account. 600 rent due. No pay for a week. She slammed the laptop screen down and dropped her head into her hands. Electricity, gas, groceries, TV, internet, phone, bill. So much to pay, so little money, and stuck in this low-paying job, trying to sell antiques to time-wasting browsers. But she didn't have a choice here in Worth. All she had was anxiety, a difficult son, and a soon-to-be philandering ex-husband who didn't give a fuck. A lump the size of a rock clogged her throat as tears welled up. What was the answer? Where was the hope? How could she? Julia. She yelped and spun towards a man in the door of the office, fear squeezing her heart until she recognized him as Douglas Peterson, one of the few regular browsers who bought. A gentleman, always immaculately dressed, white hair, bushy beard, sad eyes. Sad eyes that today looked dark. Mr. Peterson, she gasped. You scared me. My apologies. I didn't mean to. It's fine, Julia said, wiping her eyes as she slipped past him into the shop. I was in a world of my own. Haven't seen you in a while. How's the book? She grimaced as the question left her lips. She knew from past conversations he was struggling with a manuscript, his first in years having once been a mildly successful author. I gave it up, he said with a wave of a hand. The masses don't read my existing stories. They certainly don't deserve more. I'm sorry to hear that. She was, but not surprised. From what she had gathered, he was forcing it, and the process was destructive, not creative. Don't be. Trying to be successful in this day and age is a sure-fire ticket to despair. You know about that, don't you? I'm not sure, Julia scoffed. She liked the old guy, but wasn't about to confide in him. Anyway, there's not much new I can show you, I'm afraid. We did get an armoire that... I'm not here for that, Peterson cut her off. I'm going on a trip with my wife. Before I go, I wanted to give you this. He stooped to retrieve something Julia hadn't noticed. An oval mirror that rested against the counter. Carved vines and dragons twisted together within a tarnished frame that had once been lustrous gold. And its glass was home to murkiness and shadow. Something small, to thank you for your kindness these last few months. That's hardly small. Julia alternated her gaze between Peterson's face and her own staring back from the glass. I couldn't. Of course you could. I can't take it with me, and it's a shame to leave it where it won't be of use. It's special, you see. Its glass has soul-cleansing properties. I know that sounds strange, but it's helped me out of more than one hole. And I know you're in a hole too. It needs a new home. You'd make a good owner. Take it. Look into it. She opened her mouth to object, but her reflection shuddered like it was shaking its head, and something, curiosity, intrigue, made her think twice. Soul cleansing? Well, we all could use some of that. It will make you feel better. Trust me. Take it. It's a gift. That's very nice of you, Mr. Peterson. I don't know what to say except, why not? 1. Douglas sat in his study, staring into the mirror. His mysterious Japanese mirror, which he'd received as a gift from his archaeologist brother-in-law some weeks before. A timely gift that had freed him from writer's block, imposter syndrome, and depression. It was ugly, with tarnished gold edges and clouded glass, but he didn't care. He didn't care about much anymore. Not his writing, not his savings running out, not his wife, pushing him to betray his ideals by churning out crap. Since the mirror had arrived, with a note about how it could nurture and heal strained souls, nothing seemed to matter except the solace he found in its reflection. The more he looked, the more relaxed he felt, and the more certain he became that nothing could interrupt his. "For God's sake, Douglas, stop staring into that thing you haven't written in days." His wife's reflection appeared behind his, scowling while his only smiled. "It's okay, Shell. There's no need to write. Not when I have nothing to say." "Well, you better think of something. We need money. I'm sick of scraping by on the pension." "You need to write a book." "Damn Richard for sending you this hideous thing. What was he thinking? And I can't get in touch with him. It's like he disappeared off the face of the earth." It was a lovely thought, and it's helped me feel better. What are you doing?" "You're wasting time," she said, taking the mirror off the wall. "I'm moving it so you can focus." "No, Shelley, you can leave it. It takes away my anxiety and—" "Stop it, you sound like a child. Get typing. You can do 5,000 words today if you—" Douglas behind saw what she did, something inside the glass shifting. Dark shapes swirled. His reflection behind hers warped. Its eyes darkened. It seemed to lean forward, and then, like a mirage, two shimmering arms slithered forth and silver hands closed around her neck. She screamed and dropped the mirror, and Douglas staggered back as it fell, allowing a blurred form to slip out. An unstable form that was dressed like him. A half-melted form that wore his face. It stepped out of the glass as the mirror landed, its surface rippling and blurring as it broke Shelley's neck. Douglas clutched his chest and collapsed. The thing that looked like him released his wife, let her crumple to the floor, picked up the mirror. Douglas rolled onto his front, chest tightening, started to crawl towards the door. "Wait," his own voice said, and he loosed a feeble cry. "I want to thank you." The impossible thing, now solid, stepped in his way. It lowered the mirror before him. Its charcoal eyes bored into his soul. "Thank you for showing me your life," it said, and Douglas' head flopped onto his arm. His eyes came to rest on the mirror. Its glass didn't show his reflection, because his reflection was out. "This is my home now." Douglas Peterson's heart gave out, and darkness claimed him. This story contains both gore and violence as well as mental health issues, such as psychosis and kleptomania. At first it didn't appear to be anything special. That may be because it wasn't anywhere near me. Even though I was across the room from it, caught my eye and called to me. It's not the first time I've been drawn to an item before, but this one felt like it was screaming, begging to be freed from its wearer. The screams were so loud it blocked out the music playing in the background and pretty much near deafened me as well. I had to get closer. I had to try to help it. As I approached, I tried my best to keep focus and scale this guy. But it's so hard. Everything screams for freedom, and I have to pick which ones get the chance. Whatever this guy seemed like your average rich guy, too good to even touch the same money you have. God, he seems so insufferable. No wonder this ring doesn't want to be near him anymore. Luckily, I'm to interactions with people like him, mostly because to anyone else I would appear to be a carbon copy of this guy, but they don't know what I truly am. Obviously, I can't just walk up to him. This is what he expects everyone to do, so I have opted to just accidentally bump into him. Well, excuse you. You might want to watch where you're walking next time. Day God, I was right. He is insufferable. I'm so sorry, I just got lost in thought. Flynn Langdon again, my apologies. I often get lost in thought. You're at a party, man. What else can be on your mind other than this? Oh, these events can be so tedious to me. No one here really wants to provide any conversations with substance. So if I don't just get lost in thought, I'll probably end up being another mindless drone. You know what I actually understand, a world like this, individuality is how you truly stand out. At this point, he reached out his hand for a proper introduction, and as soon as I came into contact with the ring, it was like the floodgates broke, unleashing a tirade of whispered pleads for help. Begging for freedom if it wasn't for his overly firm grip, probably trying to impress me. I would have pulled back as if he had one of those hand buzzers. However, I managed to keep my composure. Honestly, I know we talked more. I can't begin to say what it was about. The pull from the ring was just so overpowering. Eventually, we stopped to talking, but he had given me his information and invited me out for drinks sometime. I went home, and I just couldn't stop thinking about ring and his pleads. Like is said before, it's not abnormal for me to hear them, but it was just so vivid, where they're normally just whispers that are easy to block out, because I can't just save everything that asks, otherwise people would start noticing. But this ring, I don't know what makes it special, but it was screaming and I can't block them out. I hardly got any sleep. All I can see when I close my eyes are that ring. Nothing else. There is no escape, no respite. All it is, that ring. Usually if something specific gets stuck on my mind, I can just help something else and block it out. But I've tried wallets, belts, necklaces, even stuff as brazen as small statues from stores. But even the little golden bull, pleading for freedom into the green pastures, but lurking in the background noise, was still the ring. Incomprehensible. As ever, but just as loud. I need to see it again. I think I'm going to call him and see if he'll go out for drinks sometime soon. It's going to be terrible, but I need to try to get that ring. Well, he said, yes. It took him some convincing, but after I said I was in the market for new ventures, he hopped on the opportunity, hook, line, and sinker. All of the business bros are the same joke. Well, after a few more sleepless nights and increasingly fruitless endeavors to try to stifle the screams for a while, but nothing helped God, nothing helps. Luckily, today's the day, and I have never been so happy to have to go out drinking with a bro. Well, he picked the most gaudy spot for day drinking. When I say gaudy, I mean it. Literally screams, come day, drink, and feel rich. Inside it was worse than the exterior. At least the tried to maintain some decency, but inside there's what seems to be solid gold statues, obviously plated, of naked women, and I spare how much detail it goes into. But trust me, it's rough. Not only were these statues everywhere, the whole room reeked of cigar smoke and musty velvet cushions. I don't know how it was done, but it was both shockingly bright, like walking into a room with all of the lights on, and dark and dank, as if we were so deep into the ground. He was sitting in a corner booth. You know, one of those circular ones. However, it doesn't work super well due to the statue in the middle towering over then center. If it wasn't for the constant scream of the ring, I'd probably sank into the velvet seats and try to avoid the staring eyes of the statues. But I had a task, and I needed to focus. Luckily, the screams made it hard to get off task. We talked for a while, business stuff, boring stuff, and honestly, I actually did not care. Finally, I got him to brag about himself, which got him talking and showing off his ring. Apparently, it's an heirloom from his grandfather, who died something like 10 years ago. This was the first time I truly got to look and hold the ring. Holding sent a shock through my whole body. I felt its pegs deep in my bones. It rattled me so much. I was considering if it just was an earthquake, but eventually it settled, and I came to and got an actually look at it. It was very reminiscent of a class ring with a ruby set in the center of the ring. Along the band, I can only assume it was the initials of his grandfather, or at least a family name. Holding the ring, I could finally hear its cries clearly. Not only did it beg for freedom and to be away from this guy, but it begged for justice for it too. I've never heard such gruesome details from an item, let alone it screaming it, as if it knew I could hear, as if it knew I would save it. I have to save it, I have to get it away from. Pardon me, do you happen to know where the bathroom is? Yeah, it's over that way. Oak, I'll be right back. Yo man, my ring. Can I have it back? Every fiber of my body in unison with the ring screamed to run. Oh yay, sorry man, I had some sushi, and it must have not been super good. No problem, we've all been there. All right, I will be right back. I need to relax, just breath. The screams are so loud, pleading me to come back, pleading me to not abandon, pleading me to come free. Its begs are so loud, I need to help it. I need to get it away from him. Something clicked, I knew what to do, and I knew how to do it walking out of the bathroom. It was like the stars aligned, the screams faded. It was a simple dialogue between the ring and I. I got to learn why the ring wanted free. He didn't value it. He didn't give it the respect it deserved. He flaunted it like it was his when he was truly its. And it doesn't find value in him anymore. Hell, a worthless piece of flesh that doesn't deserve the air he breathes, much less to own a ring as beautiful as it. Hey man, everything okay? You don't look too hot. Well, I'm okay. I think I need to leave. The sushi is hitting harder than I expected. You know what, man, that's fine. Do you live close by? It's a little bit of a walk. You know what, I'll just call an Uber for you, and I'll make sure you get home. Oh man, you don't have to. Yeah, but we still have some more to talk about, and I don't want to go back to the office yet. All right, well, thank you. Yes, it's working. I didn't expect him to pity me, but he did. I just have to grit my teeth and bear through just a little more business talk, and then I can free it. We arrived at my home after 30-ish minutes. It would have just been faster to walk, but this way worked better. My house is a controlled environment. I invited him in for a thank you drink before he left. Obviously, he accepted his kind, will do anything for a free drink. Once inside, I could barely contain my excitement. The ring and I were overflowing joy as the pieces coming together. He is not paying attention. Do it now, free me. Hearing the ring demand this, I grabbed the nearest heavyish thing, funnily enough, a freed candelabra, and I swung it at full force at the back of the head. The first thud was wet and reminiscent of a watermelon falling onto concrete. He stood dazed for a second and then collapsed. He's still alive. You have to finish him. You have to kill him to save me. I began swinging over and over. The ring cackled, the laughter filling my head. The relief I felt as the ring was being freed was immense. The laughter was finally drowning out the screams. I kept swinging and swinging, not stopping. You did good. I can be freed. Take me. You deserve me. Warning: contains themes of body horror. We don't want you in town, Mr. Watson, the waitress said. Guard jumped, more at the prefix than the hostility in the tone of the woman scowling at him from across the aging diner's bar. What? Gar asked. How do you know who I am? Because you can tell. You have the look, she said. The look? Gar asked. We can tell, she said. Gar blinked. Blood finds its level. We remember what your family did, she said. If you don't want to serve me, you can just say so. I'm only here to clean out my grandfather's cabin, satisfy his will, and sell the place, Gar said. His will? A masculine voice said from behind. Yeah. Said I have to visit at least once before I sell the place. See a mask he left to me, Gar said. There, Samantha. See? Nothing untoward. Boy didn't pick his family, the man said. Gar's jaw rolled at the comment. He has the look, Jessie, she said. She slapped a plate of greasy food in front of Gar before sulking away. Name's Jessie, see? Don't mind her. She was more bothered than most by what came out about your grandfather, Jessie said. The weather-beaten man ambled his way over to Gar. His sunburnt face and dungarees spoke to a life of labor and the rugged landscape around them, while his limp spoke to his age. Gar, think she'd poison the food? Gar asked. No. Samantha's decent folk, just riled us all, Jessie said. Gar smiled thinly. Seems so. Why do you care? Gar asked. We don't get a lot of news in town. What happened with your grandfather, with your family? But word gets around. I wanted to do something about the situation I knew was coming, that you couldn't. Knew you couldn't see the storm coming from the town folk here. See, Jessie said. You knew I was coming into town? Gar asked. Our lawyer, the town's only lawyer, that is, Mr. Potts. He let me know confidentially about that unusual stipulation in the will, see? So I'd been checking in on when the train arrives in the afternoons. Little late today. Apologies, Jessie said. And I thought small towns were supposed to act Christian, Gar said. Jessie laughed. Not this one. Your line saw to that. But like I said, you got nothing to do with it, coming from all the way where you do, Jessie said. Gar nodded. Suppose so. Well, thank you, friend, Gar said. We should get going now if you want to get there in good time, Jessie said. There's no other way up there? Gar asked. Horse, I suppose. But from the rail station? No, Jessie said. Ain't no cab service out here in these parts. Gar smiled wanly, and once the plate was empty, the pair walked outside to the street. The pickup truck Jessie drove was nearly as old and rusting as the rest of the town, which hadn't seen an uptick in industry since the First World War. The outbreak of the Second hadn't seemed to affect the fortunes of the small smelting town, although Gar supposed that the war effort had less use for silver than it did iron or steel. Jessie had guided them up the mountain, past long minutes of imposing pine before he attempted to yell over the rattling of the vehicle. So, what brings you up all this way? Jessie asked. Well, my grandfather passed, Gar said. Sure, but he's buried already. Sheriff had Jeff dig a hole for him out back. Jeff's the deputy, see? Jessie said. Is that common out here? To get buried in your backyard? Gar asked. Jessie winced. Backyard is a city word, he said. I saw the church on my way into town. There's a proper cemetery here, Gar said. No reason to get fiery with me, see? It would have been difficult for us to put him there, and the county next door didn't want him either, Jessie said. How charitable. It's kind of you looking out for your kin, but this ain't no place for that. It's about getting by up here, remember that. Gar let the rattling of the steel frame answer. I guess I'm asking why isn't your da the one out here? Seems more natural that way, see? Jessie said. He's dead, Gar said. Oh, sorry for your loss. You don't have to be. Why? He not treat you right? I'd rather not talk about it. Just seems like a cold-blooded thing to say. Well, he's dead. You got your answer. Jessie shifted in his seat. So, why's this mask so important? I mean, why do you have to see it before you can sell the cabin? Jessie asked. I don't know. It's from Africa. Supposed to worth something unlike everything else up there. If everyone knows about my family, apparently, then I wouldn't be surprised if it was gone by the time we got there, Gar said. You Ever hear of the Tsavo Maniators? Jesse asked. Gar blinked at the change of topic. No, 2 lions that preyed on human flesh down in British Africa. See? But they weren't no normal lions. Didn't have manes. They came at night and knew how to trick grown men. Lion hunting men. Our kind still dropped like flies, Jesse said. Well, glad there aren't any lions here, Gar said. No mane. Never saw a drawing, but can you imagine? No mane on a lion, Jesse said. That's what a lioness looks like, Gar said. Maybe you just wouldn't get it, Jesse said. Why wouldn't I? Gar asked. Because you don't. Gar huffed and turned to the window. How much further? Just about here. The cabin was a squat building, changed over the centuries by countless renovations from a simple log cabin to a more sprawling mishmash of architectural styles. Dim light filtered through the thick vegetation that hemmed in the structure on all sides, casting long shadows on the splintering wood of the house. Gar noted the smell of recently disturbed loam among the clean mountain air. Ignoring the implications of the scent, Gar took long strides toward the open door facing the long driveway they had parked on. Let's get this over with. Gar moved through the house, aimlessly searching while Jesse made a beeline for the kitchen. Leaving him to whatever task held his attention, Gar began opening doors in search of the mask. After several obvious dead ends upon opening the door to the study, Gar found something undeniable. Among a mess of half-read books and unfinished notes lay a wooden display box, holding a frightful visage turned towards any who dared to enter the room. The mask was a hideous thing to behold. Its coal-black exterior had a lacquer on the surface that gave every intricately carved well and cranny on the thing a twisting orange glow from the reflected light of the fireplace. The overall impression of the carvings left one thinking of a predatory animal, yet it had no eyes and no mouth, and 2 monstrous curling horns rose above what passed for its face. The angular orifices on the front could have been the pitted nostrils of a viper, were it not for their excessive number, but there was something altogether too alien in the arrangement to compare it to a mere serpent. Gar could not help but think it was rather impossible for it to have come from Africa. In a flash, unbidden thoughts came to Gar's mind. Ugly, familiar images appeared, the distortions of the shaving mirror attacking unexpectedly to Royal Gar's stomach at the sight of the growing protrusions emerging from her skin. A distended skeleton, heavy with unfeeling flesh and hardened by unwanted strength, tried to swim through the malaise, only for Gar to fall to the floor, and then through it. Spinning through space, Gar saw a solid form appear, feminine and impossible, and wearing her face, her real face, beckoning her on with a sad smile. Gar gasped as the flickering light of the room returned, as she fell to the solid floor with a heavy impact, as the vision faded. Springing to her feet and slamming the door, Gar's breath came in burning gasps as she threw open the door to the kitchen, startling Jesse. We have to leave. Jesse, we have to go now, Gar said. Can't. If you wanted to leave, you shouldn't have come here, Jesse said. What? I mean, the sun's gone down. See, Jesse said. Never make it down there without headlights. Your truck doesn't have headlights, Gar asked. Not none that work, Jesse said. Gar repressed a scream. You all right? Jesse asked. No, grief. Just grief. Being here where he was, it's making me crazy, Gar said. Jesse nodded before clapping Gar on the shoulder, ignoring the reflexive twitch that resulted as he spoke. We just get some rest then. Decaf coffee for your nerves? No. Thank you, Jesse. I think he'll just head to bed." It was a small mercy that the home had 2 bedrooms. Gar picked the smaller of the 2 and tried to settle into the small cot it provided. The task proved impossible, leading Gar to seek out a familiar remedy to insomnia. The room Gar was in had none of the obvious supply of books to be found in the office. Curious, Gar searched a desk in the room, and instead of finding stacks of notes in neat script, found dozens of carved wooden figures, but without the corresponding tools to make them. Shuddering at the thought of returning to the study, Gar continued to look until she found a hidden latch at the back of the bottom desk drawer. Pulling it in mindless curiosity, revealed a secret compartment containing a journal labeled in large scrawling letters, "The Final Journal of Ezra Garfield Watson." Blinking in surprise, Gar opened the book. In near illegible writing, Ezra begged forgiveness of whoever was reading his notebook, before telling of a heinous crime he had committed to doom his line. Further deciphering of the malformed letters revealed no specifics on the act, but veered in thought to send a warning of a ritual of transformation. Just as Gar began to read about what changes could occur, and how they could be linked to the inner sin Ezra carried, something white flashed by the window. Gar started for the way out of the house, throwing away the evil book as she went. It had to be the townspeople planting things in his grandfather's house to paint him as a lunatic, Gar thought. It had to be their way to rationalize his affair. Despite the neat explanation, something gnawed at her psyche, even as she rushed towards the moonlight night. Dashing outside of the house, Gar saw that Jesse's truck was gone. Around the corner of the house, long white horns moved along with a disturbance through the underbrush. Without thinking, Gar ran after the form, crashing through the bush to reveal a game trail that led around the perimeter of the house. Sprinting along the path soon revealed an opening in the foliage just wide enough for Gar to trip on a knotted root and fall through to the backyard, almost directly onto Ezra's grave. The grave dirt had been disturbed by something other than Gar's clumsiness. A horrible, impossible thought came to Gar's mind. Reaching for the rusty shovel carelessly discarded next to the headstone, Gar drove the point of the shovel into the ground with conviction. With the strength of the possessed, Gar heaved each shovelful of dirt well clear of the grave. Sweat poured down skin pale with the wretched possibility beneath the cold mountain earth. Finally, the spade point of the shovel hit something solid. Swinging the heavy shovel overhead like an executioner's axe, Gar smashed into the dirty pine with abandon. Throwing away the shovel and pulling aside the rotting boards with bare hands, Gar released the charnel stench of the coffin's contents, and pulling the boards away revealed the rictus grin of her grandfather on a misshapen body. Gar screamed at the missing skin of the face, the bulbous protrusions at base of the skull, and the mottled, miscolored skin of his pulpous midsection. There was the whistling of an object flying through the air before everything went black. The sound of chanting woke Gar to a world of disorienting pain. Jesse, Samantha, and a third man wearing a horned white mask stood in a semicircle around where Gar was tied securely to a kitchen chair. They were dressed in white robes, and an unearthly chant came from the backs of their throats, intoned in a language Gar couldn't understand even as the sounds came with an unremembered familiarity. A brazier sitting in the middle of their circle illuminated the scene, and hanging off of the gleaming bronze metal was the black mask of her grandfather. "What do you people want?" Gar asked. The figure in white strode across the room, grasping the black mask and turning it in his hands as he closed the distance between himself and Gar. The inside of the mask grew closer to Gar's face as the man moved to force it on. The images returned even through the chanting. "What do you people want from me?" Gar screamed. The mask fit Gar's face so closely as to become a second skin. Heat prickled, then burned as sensation connected, and flesh melted into a lacquered ebony that was more than mere wood. The shape morphed to caress the fitted bone of Gar's face, despite the convulsive thrashing of Gar's body, and a distorted multi-voice shriek broke the stillness of the air. The horrible sound of bone splintering and cracking came, starting at the head and moving down the body as skin rippled over, changing flesh and sinew. The chanting never ceased during the metamorphosis. A new form slowly took shape under the thin black robes Gar was dressed in. Fat redistributed to give Gar an hourglass shape even as the skull morphed at the jaw to expand outward and fuse the growing ear holes to fleshy cavities. Gar could hear the shapes of the room in a grainy image in their mind, an impressionist painting in shades of gray that illustrated teeth erupting from mottled skin to bite new mouths into the palms of her hands. However, Gar could no longer see a further paling of flesh or the changing of red blood to black ichor, plainly visible under the skin. Sobs broke from the figure and tears poured from sightless eyes under the terrible black mask. The chanting ceased, and the man in the white mask spoke. "Your great-grandfather was the first to wear the mask for us, supplying your family with the comfortable lies of childhood. Your grandfather accepted the burden for his time, and he would be commended in this town if not for his folly. Hard times make hard men, but soft times make hard men, but soft times make soft men. And he lacked the hardness to properly pass the mask on. Your father rejected him, and hard times followed. You are the hard—" Gar let out a barking laugh. "You think I jest? That this town does not have the reach to publicize your grandfather's affairs with men? That the unveiling petty sex could undermine our work here? That you cannot become the next in line for this legacy? You already have," he said. Gar shifted in her bonds. "Can you feel it? Becoming one with it, baptizing yourself inside and out, letting your weak humanity fall away to embrace true revelation?" he asked. Gar shook her head. "You wonder how you will be helped to us in this true form. We will go to the place of power, as the planets align, and you will access the riches there. You are the other mask, the stranger to my leader, and together we two sides of a coin that will restore order," he said. Gar twisted in her bonds, trying vainly to catch the corner of the mask with her shoulder. "This cannot be undone. The mask is a part of you now. We are brothers. We are one with the masks. We see beyond this pale imitation to the way things are, and in seeing beyond it, can mold this illusion to whatever charming lie we see fit. We hold power, true power in our hands, if only we can stoop low, for it will be real, for it will in this sense." The creature let out a baleful sound. "Yes, you understand. Good. Madness cannot take us for looking upon you, for the devil does not fear his demons. Follow, and share of the power you never could have touched in your sad little life before you learned the truth of your blood," he said. Gar snarled, and the truth of her blood sprang forth with a crack as ribs erupted from under the skin to cut the ropes holding her with bone sharpened to a knife edge. The weapons extended to their full length on tendrils of pale flesh, whipping through the air with a fatal efficiency. Screams, not of rapturous exultation but of terror, echoed in the night before falling away to gurgling cries. The cabin stood silent in the woods. A woman's form fled into the gnarled pines of the mountain, a halo of moonlight and long wings, of violent appendages spreading from her back. The only sound was a distorted animal weeping, muffled by a chitinous mask.